What started as a simple car breakdown on a quiet suburban street would become the moment that changed 4 lives forever. When single dad Ethan Cole spotted a stranded mother and daughter, his act of kindness would unlock a whispered secret from an innocent child, one that would dare 2 broken hearts to love again. Before we dive into this incredible journey of love loss and second chances, hit that subscribe button and comment below with your city, so I can see how far this story travels around the world. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Maple Street, painting the quiet suburban neighborhood in hues of gold and amber. It was the kind of perfect autumn day that made everything seem possible. Crisp air carrying the scent of fallen leaves, children's laughter echoing from nearby backyards, and the gentle hum of life moving at its own peaceful pace. But for Clara Reynolds, standing helplessly beside her stalled BMW sedan, this beautiful day felt like anything but perfect. Come on," she muttered under her breath, turning the key in the ignition for what felt like the 100th time. The engine made a weak clicking sound before falling silent again, as if mocking her mounting frustration. Clara's perfectly manicured fingers gripped the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles white with tension. From the passenger seat, her 7-year-old daughter Lily watched with wide, concerned eyes. "Mommy, are we going to be okay?" Clara forced a smile, the kind mother's perfect when they need to be strong, even when they feel like falling apart. "Of course, sweetheart. Mommy's just having a little trouble with the car. We'll figure it out." But inside, Clara felt anything but confident. Her knowledge of cars extended only as far as knowing where to put the gas and how to turn on the radio. She was a lawyer. She solved problems with words, contracts, and careful negotiation. Mechanical failures were entirely outside her expertise, and right now she felt utterly helpless. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts for a towing service, her mind already calculating the cost and inconvenience. The nearest mechanic was 20 minutes away, and she had promised Lily they'd stop for ice cream after school. Another broken promise to add to the growing list that seemed to define their relationship lately. "Try calling Daddy," Lily suggested quietly. Clara's heart clenched. "Honey, you know Daddy lives far away now. Remember, he moved to California for his new job." The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, but the wounds still felt fresh. David had chosen his career over his family, claiming the promotion was too good to pass up. What he hadn't said, but what Clara knew in her bones, was that the promotion was just an excuse to escape the life they'd built together. Escape the responsibility of being a husband and father when things got difficult. Now it was just Clara and Lily against the world, and moments like this made that reality feel especially heavy. Across the street, Ethan Cole was just finishing up in his garage workshop when he heard the repeated attempts to start an engine. He paused, wiping his hands on an old rag, and looked up to see a sleek black BMW sitting motionless in the middle of the road. Through the windshield, he could make out a woman's silhouette, her shoulders tense with frustration. Ethan had been a mechanic for over 15 years, long enough to recognize the sound of a car in distress. But it wasn't just professional instinct that made him pay attention. It was something deeper, a fundamental need to help when he saw someone struggling. "Sophie, I'll be right back," he called to his 9-year-old daughter, who was sitting at his workbench, carefully organizing bolts by size. It was their Saturday afternoon ritual. While he worked on projects, she'd help in her own way, both of them finding comfort in the quiet companionship. "Where are you going, Dad?" Sophie looked up from her task, her dark hair falling across her face. "Someone needs help with their car. Won't take long." Sophie nodded, already turning back to her organizing. She was used to her father's tendency to help others. It was one of the things she loved most about him, even if she didn't fully understand why he always put other people's needs before his own. Ethan grabbed a small toolbox and walked across the street, his work boots crunching softly on the asphalt. As he approached the BMW, he could see the woman more clearly through the driver's side window. She had shoulder-length auburn hair that caught the late afternoon light, and even in her obvious frustration, there was something graceful about her movements. He tapped gently on the window, careful not to startle her. Clara jumped slightly, then looked up to see a man standing beside her car. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a simple gray t-shirt and jeans that had seen better days. His hands were stained with oil, and there was something about his steady, calm presence that immediately put her at ease, even though she'd never seen him before. She rolled down the window, feeling slightly embarrassed about her situation. "Car trouble?" Ethan asked, his voice warm and reassuring. "I'm afraid so," Clara replied, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "It just stopped running about 10 minutes ago. I was about to call a tow truck." "Mind if I take a look? I'm a mechanic. I live right across the street." He gestured toward the house with the open garage. Sometimes these things are simpler than they seem. Clara hesitated for a moment. She'd been taught to be cautious around strangers, especially when Lily was with her. But something about this man's demeanor, the genuine concern in his eyes, the way he kept a respectful distance, made her feel safe. "That's very kind of you," she said, stepping out of the car. "I'm Clara, and this is my daughter Lily." "Ethan Cole," he replied with a slight smile. "Nice to meet you both." Lily waved shyly from the passenger seat, her natural curiosity overcoming her initial wariness. There was something about this man that reminded her of her grandfather, solid, dependable, safe. "Let me guess," Ethan said, moving toward the front of the car. "It's making a clicking sound when you try to start it, but the engine won't turn over." Clara's eyes widened. "Exactly. How did you know? 15 years of fixing cars teaches you to recognize the symptoms," Ethan said, popping the hood. "Usually means your battery's dead or your starter's gone bad. Let me check a few things." As Ethan leaned over the engine, Clara found herself studying him more closely. There was something refreshingly honest about him, no pretense, no agenda, just a straightforward desire to help. In her world of legal maneuvering and carefully crafted negotiations, such genuine simplicity was rare. "Daddy was a mechanic," Lily announced suddenly, having rolled down her window to join the conversation. Clara felt her cheeks flush. "Lily, Mr. Cole doesn't need to hear about—" "Actually, I think I found your problem," Ethan interrupted gently, saving Clara from having to explain her complicated family situation to a stranger. He held up a corroded battery cable. "Your positive terminal connection is completely shot. That's why you're getting the clicking, but no power to the starter." "Is it expensive to fix?" Clara asked, already mentally calculating the impact on her carefully managed budget. Ethan smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes and made the corners crinkle slightly. "Lucky for you, I've got the part you need right in my garage. It's about a $5 fix, and it'll take me maybe 10 minutes to install." Clara blinked in surprise. After months of dealing with contractors, lawyers, and service providers, who seemed to see dollar signs whenever they looked at her, Ethan's straightforward honesty was almost shocking. "You don't have to do that," she said quickly. "I can call a mechanic, have it towed." "No need," Ethan said, already walking back toward his garage. "Like I said, 10 minutes. You'll be back on the road before you know it." As Ethan disappeared into his garage, Clara found herself standing beside her car, unsure of what to do with this unexpected kindness. She was used to solving her own problems, handling her own crises. The idea of accepting help from a stranger felt foreign, almost uncomfortable. "Mommy, he seems nice," Lily observed, pressing her face against the window. "Yes, he does," Clara agreed, though she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Ethan Cole than met the eye. In her experience, people who seemed too good to be true usually were. A few minutes later, Ethan returned with a new battery cable and a small toolkit. As he worked, Clara found herself drawn into conversation, despite her initial reservations. "So, you're a mechanic?" she asked, leaning against the side of her car. "Own a small shop about 10 minutes from here," Ethan replied, not looking up from his work. "Cole's Auto Repair. Nothing fancy, but we do honest work for fair prices." "That's becoming increasingly rare," Clara said, and there was something in her tone that made Ethan glance up at her. "Lawyer," he guessed, reading the subtle signs, the expensive but practical clothing, the way she spoke with careful precision, the slight wariness in her eyes that suggested someone accustomed to dealing with people who had hidden agendas. Clara looked surprised. "How did you—" "Lucky guess," Ethan said with a small smile. "You have that look of someone who's used to solving other people's problems." "I suppose I do," Clara said, though she couldn't remember the last time someone had read her so accurately after such a brief interaction. From inside the garage across the street, Sophie Cole watched her father work on the stranger's car. She could see him talking and smiling more than he had in weeks, and something about that made her curious. Her father was always helping people. It was just who he was, but there was something different about the way he was interacting with this woman and her daughter. Sophie had learned to be observant about such things. For the past 3 years since her mother died, it had been just her and her dad. She'd watched him throw himself into work and parenting with equal dedication. But she'd also noticed the way his eyes looked sad sometimes when he thought she wasn't watching. Her friends at school had mothers and fathers, complete families, and while Sophie loved her dad more than anything in the world, she sometimes wondered what it would be like to have a mom again. "There we go," Ethan announced, stepping back from the BMW's engine. "Try starting her up now." Clara slipped back into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine immediately roared to life, purring smoothly, as if it had never been broken at all. "Oh my goodness," Clara breathed, relief flooding through her voice. "You're a miracle worker." "Hardly," Ethan said, closing the hood. "Just knew what to look for." Clara reached for her purse, pulling out her wallet. "What do I owe you for the part and your time?" Ethan held up his hands, shaking his head. "Nothing. Happy to help." "Nothing?" Clara stared at him in disbelief. "But the part alone cost me maybe $3, Ethan said truthfully. "And the time? Well, it's Saturday afternoon. I wasn't doing anything that couldn't wait." Clara felt something shift inside her chest, a warmth she hadn't experienced in longer than she cared to remember. When was the last time someone had helped her without expecting something in return? When was the last time someone had made her feel like her problems mattered, not because of what she could pay them, but simply because she was a human being who needed help? "I don't know what to say," she said softly. "Say you'll pay it forward," Ethan replied simply. "Help someone else when they need it." Before Clara could respond, Lily leaned out the passenger window with the fearless enthusiasm that only children possess. "Mr. Ethan, do you like ice cream?" "Lily?" Clara felt her cheeks redden. "I'm sorry, I love ice cream," Ethan said seriously, addressing Lily directly. "Why do you ask?" "Because Mommy promised we could get ice cream after school, but then the car broke and now it's fixed, so maybe you could come with us." The words tumbled out of Lily in an excited rush. "As a thank you for fixing our car." Clara wanted to disappear into the ground. "Lily, I'm sure Mr. Cole has better things to do than—" "Actually," Ethan said, glancing back toward his garage where Sophie was still working. I think my daughter would love some ice cream too. Sophie, come here for a minute. Sophie appeared at the edge of the garage, her dark hair slightly mussed, and a smudge of grease on her cheek where she'd touched her face with her fingers. Sophie, this is Mrs. Reynolds and her daughter Lily. They're inviting us for ice cream. What do you think? Sophie studied the strangers for a moment, her gaze lingering on Lily's eager face. She was used to being cautious around new people. Her father had taught her to be careful, but there was something about this little girl's enthusiasm that was infectious. Can we, Dad? Sophie asked, and Ethan could hear the loneliness in her voice that she tried so hard to hide. If it's really okay with Mrs. Reynolds, Ethan said, looking at Clara questioningly. Clara found herself nodding before she'd fully processed the decision. Of course. It's the least I can do. There's a great place just a few blocks away, Scoops and Dreams. I know it, Sophie said, her face lighting up. They have 37 flavors. 38, Lily corrected with the authority of a 7-year-old ice cream expert. They added birthday cake last month. And just like that, the ice was broken. Sophie and Lily began an animated discussion about ice cream flavors and toppings, while Ethan and Clara found themselves smiling at their daughter's instant connection. Are you sure about this? Clara asked quietly, stepping closer to Ethan. I don't want to impose on your Saturday. You're not imposing, Ethan assured her. Sophie doesn't get out much except for school. She could use more friends her age. There was something in the way he said it that made Clara suspect there was more to the story, but she didn't press. Everyone had their complications, their private struggles. She certainly understood that better than most. 20 minutes later, they were seated around a small round table at Scoops and Dreams, watching their daughters bond over enormous sundaes. Sophie had ordered Rocky Road with hot fudge and whipped cream, while Lily had chosen mint chocolate chip with rainbow sprinkles and a cherry on top. So, Clara said, taking a small spoonful of her vanilla ice cream. How long have you been in the neighborhood? About 5 years, Ethan replied. We moved here after... He paused, glancing at Sophie, who was completely absorbed in her ice cream, and Lily's chatter about her school's upcoming Halloween party. After my wife passed away. Clara felt her heart clench with sympathy. I'm so sorry. Cancer, Ethan said simply. It was a long fight, but she was brave until the end. Sophie was only 6. That must have been incredibly difficult, Clara said softly, understanding now why Sophie seemed so mature for her age, why there was a slight sadness in her eyes even when she smiled. Some days are harder than others, Ethan admitted. But Sophie's resilient. Kids are stronger than we give them credit for. Clara nodded, thinking of her own daughter's adjustment to the divorce. Yes, they are. Sometimes I think Lily handles change better than I do. Divorce? Ethan asked gently, and Clara was surprised by how easily she found herself opening up to this man she'd met less than an hour ago. 6 months ago, she confirmed. Her father moved to California for work. Well, let's just say he decided that being a family man wasn't compatible with his career ambitions. I'm sorry, Ethan said, and Clara could hear the genuine sympathy in his voice. That's hard on both of you. We're managing, Clara said, though the truth was that some days felt like barely surviving. It's an adjustment learning to be a single parent. If it helps, Ethan said, you seem to be doing a great job. Lily's obviously happy and well-adjusted. Clara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. It had been so long since anyone had told her she was doing anything right when it came to parenting. David's criticism during their marriage had left her constantly second-guessing herself, wondering if she was too strict or not strict enough, too protective or not protective enough. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means more than you know." At the other end of the table, Sophie and Lily had moved on from ice cream flavors to discussing their favorite books. Clara was amazed to watch her sometimes shy daughter chatting animatedly with this new friend, her face bright with excitement. "I love the Magic Tree House books," Lily was saying. "Have you read the one where they go to ancient Egypt?" "That's my favorite," Sophie replied. "I want to be an archaeologist when I grow up and discover mummies." "That's so cool. I want to be a veterinarian and take care of animals." Ethan caught Clara's eye, and they shared a smile, both recognizing the magic of watching children connect so effortlessly. "They seem to be hitting it off," Clara observed. "Sophie doesn't make friends easily," Ethan said quietly. "She's been through a lot, and I think she's learned to be careful about trusting people. But there's something about Lily. Lily's the same way," Clara said. "She's been more withdrawn since the divorce. But look at her now." Indeed, Lily was giggling at something Sophie had said, her whole face lit up with joy in a way Clara hadn't seen in months. As they finished their ice cream, Clara found herself reluctant for the afternoon to end. There was something so comfortable about sitting here with Ethan and the girls, something that felt almost like family. The thought caught her off guard. She hadn't allowed herself to even consider the possibility of that kind of connection again. After David, she'd built walls around her heart, determined to focus solely on providing for Lily and rebuilding their life as a family of two. But sitting here watching Ethan interact so gently with both girls, seeing the way he listened to them with genuine interest and patience, Clara felt those walls beginning to crack just slightly. "Mommy," Lily said suddenly, turning to Clara with bright eyes, "can Sophie come over for a playdate sometime?" Clara glanced at Ethan, who was clearly waiting to see how she'd respond. "Well, that would be up to Sophie's dad," she said carefully. "Can I, Dad?" Sophie asked, looking at Ethan with hopeful eyes. "Please." Ethan looked between Clara and the girls, weighing his response carefully. He'd learned to be cautious about new people in their lives, especially when it came to Sophie's emotional well-being. But there was something about Clara and Lily that felt safe, real. "If Mrs. Reynolds is okay with it," he said finally. "It's Clara," she corrected with a smile. "And I'd love to have Sophie over, maybe next Saturday afternoon." "Can we, Dad, please?" Sophie's excitement was infectious. "All right," Ethan agreed, and both girls cheered as if he'd just announced they were going to Disneyland. As they prepared to leave the ice cream shop, Clara felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. What was she doing inviting this man's daughter over for a playdate? It had been so long since she'd done anything social, so long since she'd opened her life to new people. But as she watched Lily skip ahead with Sophie, the two girls already making plans for their upcoming playdate, Clara realized that maybe it was time to start taking small steps forward. Maybe it was time to stop being afraid of letting people in. "I'll give you my number," Clara said to Ethan as they reached their cars. "For the playdate arrangements." "Of course," Ethan said, pulling out his phone. As they exchanged contact information, their fingers brushed briefly when Clara handed him her phone to enter her number. It was the smallest touch, barely a whisper of contact, but Clara felt a jolt of electricity that she hadn't experienced in years. "Thank you again," she said, stepping back quickly. "For fixing the car, for the ice cream, for everything." "Thank you for letting us join you," Ethan replied. Sophie had more fun today than she's had in months. As Clara and Lily drove away, Ethan and Sophie stood in their driveway watching the BMW disappear around the corner. "I like them, Dad," Sophie said quietly, slipping her small hand into his larger one. Me too, sweetheart, Ethan admitted, though he wasn't sure he was ready to examine exactly what that meant. Maybe we could be friends with them. Sophie continued, her voice hopeful, but cautious, as if she was afraid to want something too much. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. Maybe we could. That evening, as Clara tucked Lily into bed, her daughter was still chattering excitedly about their new friends. Sophie is so nice, Mommy, and Mr. Ethan fixed our car like magic. Do you think we'll see them again soon? Well, Sophie is coming over next Saturday for a playdate, Clara reminded her. I know, but I mean all of us together, like today. It was fun, wasn't it? Clara smoothed Lily's hair back from her forehead, considering her daughter's question. Yes, sweetheart. It was fun. I hope we can do it again, Lily said sleepily. It felt like we were a family. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Lily. But her daughter had already drifted off to sleep, leaving Clara alone with thoughts she wasn't ready to face. Across town, Ethan was having a similar conversation with Sophie as he read her bedtime story. Dad, do you think Mrs. Clara is nice? Sophie asked, interrupting the tale of a brave princess. I think she's very nice, Ethan said honestly. Do you think she's pretty? Ethan paused, his cheeks warming slightly. Sophie. You do, I can tell. Sophie giggled. It's okay, Dad. I think she's pretty too. And I think she likes you. What makes you say that? Ethan asked, curious despite himself. The way she smiled at you, like Mommy used to smile at you. Ethan felt his heart clench. Sophie rarely mentioned her mother these days, and when she did, it was usually in passing. But this comparison felt significant, like Sophie was giving him permission to consider the possibility of happiness again. What would you think, Ethan asked carefully, if Daddy made some new friends, adult friends? Sophie considered this seriously. I think that would be good. You're sad sometimes when you think I can't see. Maybe having friends would make you less sad. Ethan marveled at his daughter's perceptiveness. He thought he'd been hiding his loneliness so well, but apparently children saw more than adults gave them credit for. Maybe, he agreed softly. As both families settled into their respective homes that night, none of them could have predicted how thoroughly their lives were about to change. What had started as a simple act of kindness, a stranger helping with a broken-down car, had set in motion a series of events that would challenge everything they thought they knew about love, family, and second chances. In her bedroom, Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the warmth in Ethan's eyes and the gentle way he'd interacted with Lily. She thought about how long it had been since she'd felt truly relaxed around a man, how natural the afternoon had felt, despite the fact that they were essentially strangers. Meanwhile, Ethan found himself unable to stop thinking about Clara's smile, the way she'd laughed at the ice cream shop, the obvious love and devotion she showed her daughter. For the first time in 3 years, he allowed himself to wonder what it might be like to open his heart again. Neither of them realized that their daughters were harboring hopes and dreams that would soon change everything. And neither of them could have imagined that a 7-year-old's innocent wisdom would be the key to healing wounds they thought would never mend. The foundation had been laid for something beautiful, something neither Clara nor Ethan was quite ready to acknowledge yet. But love, as they would soon discover, has its own timeline, its own wisdom. And sometimes it takes the pure, uncomplicated heart of a child to show adults what they're too afraid to see for themselves. As autumn deepened into winter, their lives would become increasingly intertwined. Their carefully constructed walls would begin to crumble, and they would discover that sometimes the most unexpected encounters lead to the most extraordinary transformations. But that night, as the first chapter of their story came to a close, all they knew was that something had shifted. Something had begun. And for the first time in longer than either cared to remember, the future felt full of possibility. The following Saturday arrived with the crisp promise of late autumn, and Clara found herself checking the clock every few minutes as she prepared for Sophie's visit. She'd spent the morning cleaning the house with an intensity that surprised even her, rearranging throw pillows and wiping down surfaces that were already spotless. When she caught herself reorganizing the books on the coffee table for the third time, she forced herself to stop and take a deep breath. "Mommy, you're being weird," Lily observed from her perch on the kitchen counter, where she was supposedly helping make cookies, but mostly just licking the mixing spoon. "I'm not being weird," Clara protested, though she knew her daughter was right. "I just want everything to be nice for Sophie." "Sophie won't care if the house is messy," Lily said, with the matter-of-fact wisdom of a 7-year-old. "She's coming to play with me, not inspect our furniture." Clara paused in her nervous tidying, struck by her daughter's observation. When had she become so concerned about appearances, so worried about judgment? The divorce had left her feeling exposed and vulnerable constantly, second-guessing herself, but she didn't want that anxiety to infect this new friendship. "You're absolutely right," she said, kissing the top of Lily's head. "How about we focus on making these cookies perfect instead?" They were just pulling the first batch of chocolate chip cookies from the oven when the doorbell rang. Lily squealed with excitement and raced to the front door, with Clara following at a more measured pace, smoothing her hair and checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. Through the glass panels beside the door, Clara could see Ethan standing on her front porch with Sophie beside him. He was wearing dark jeans and a navy blue sweater that made his eyes look even more striking, and Sophie was practically bouncing on her toes with excitement, clutching a small wrapped gift. "They're here," Lily announced, unnecessarily fumbling with the deadbolt in her eagerness to open the door. Clara helped her daughter with the lock and swung the door open immediately, struck by how right it felt to see Ethan standing there. Over the past week, she'd found herself thinking about him more often than she cared to admit, remembering the warmth of his smile, the gentle way he'd spoken to Lily, the unexpected kindness he'd shown them. "Hi," she said, hoping her voice sounded more casual than she felt. "Hi," Ethan replied, and Clara noticed that his smile seemed a little nervous too, which somehow had made her feel better. "Sophie," Lily exclaimed, grabbing her new friend's hand and pulling her into the house. "Come see my room, I cleaned it and everything." Sophie laughed, allowing herself to be dragged inside. "I brought you something," she said, holding out the small wrapped package. "Dad helped me pick it out." "You didn't need to bring anything," Clara said, touched by the gesture. "Dad says you should always bring a gift when someone invites you to their house," Sophie explained seriously. "It's good manners." "Your dad is absolutely right," Clara agreed, shooting a grateful look at Ethan. "Why don't you girls go upstairs while your dad and I finish getting the snacks ready?" As the girls thundered up the stairs, their excited chatter echoing through the house, Clara and Ethan were left standing in the entryway, suddenly aware that they were alone together for the first time since that day at the ice cream shop. "Your house is beautiful," Ethan said, looking around at the warm, inviting living space. Clara had decorated in soft earth tones with touches of blue and green, creating an atmosphere that was both elegant and comfortable. "Thank you," Clara said, leading him toward the kitchen. "Can I get you some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." "That sounds perfect." As Clara busied herself with mugs and cream, Ethan took in the details of her kitchen, the children's artwork magneted to the refrigerator, the fresh flowers on the windowsill, the lingering scent of baking cookies. Everything about the space spoke of care and attention, of a mother who worked hard to create a loving home for her daughter. "The cookies smell incredible," he said, accepting the steaming mug she offered him. "Lily insisted we make them from scratch," Clara explained. "I usually just buy the pre-made dough, but she wanted to do everything properly for Sophie's visit." "She's a sweet kid," Ethan said. "Both of them are lucky to have found each other." They settled at the kitchen island, the comfortable silence broken by the sound of giggles and running footsteps from upstairs. Clara found herself studying Ethan's profile as he sipped his coffee, noting the slight lines around his eyes that spoke of someone who spent time outdoors, the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "How has Sophie been since last Saturday?" Clara asked. "About the playdate, I mean. Has she been excited?" Ethan's face lit up with a smile that made Clara's heart skip a beat. "She's talked about it every day. I think she's been planning activities since the moment we got home. She even made a list." "A list? Complete with backup plans in case you didn't like any of her ideas?" Ethan chuckled. "She wanted to make sure Lily would have fun." Clara felt her chest tighten with emotion. "That's so thoughtful. Lily's been the same way. She's been cleaning her room all week and practicing different games she could teach Sophie." "It's nice to see them both so happy," Ethan said quietly. "Sophie's been, well, she's been more withdrawn since her mom died. I was starting to worry that she'd forgotten how to just be a kid." "Lily's been struggling too," Clara admitted. "The divorce has been hard on her. She's had to grow up faster than I would have liked. But this week, planning for today, she's seemed more like her old self." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both listening to the sounds of their daughters playing together upstairs. There was something profoundly peaceful about it, Clara realized. For the first time in months, she felt truly relaxed in her own home. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said suddenly, his voice careful and measured. "Of course." "How do you do it, single parenting, I mean? Some days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water, and you seem to have everything so together." Clara nearly choked on her coffee. "Together? You think I have it together?" "Well, yeah," Ethan said, looking confused by her reaction. "Beautiful home, successful career. Lily's obviously well-adjusted and happy." "Ethan," Clara said, setting down her mug and turning to face him fully. "Last Tuesday, I served Lily cereal for dinner because I forgot to go grocery shopping. On Thursday, I cried in my car after a particularly brutal day in court because I felt like I was failing at everything. And yesterday, I had a minor panic attack in the Target checkout line because Lily asked for something, and I realized I'd been saying no to everything lately just because I'm stressed about money." Ethan stared at her for a moment, then started to laugh, not in a mocking way, but with genuine relief and understanding. "Thank God," he said. "I thought I was the only one who was completely winging it. Last week, Sophie and I had hot dogs 3 nights in a row because I couldn't figure out what else to make. And don't even get me started on the laundry situation." "The laundry?" Clara exclaimed. "Why is there always so much laundry? How does one small person generate so many clothes?" "I've given up trying to understand it," Ethan said, grinning. "I just keep buying more socks and hope for the best." Their shared laughter felt like a release, like admitting their imperfections had somehow made them both more human, more real to each other. Clara realized that she'd been so focused on appearing competent and in control that she'd forgotten how good it felt to just be honest about the struggles. "Dad," Sophie's voice echoed down the stairs. "Can you come see Lily's room? It has glow-in-the-dark stars." "Duty calls," Ethan said, standing up. "Want to come with me?" "Absolutely." They climbed the stairs together, and Clara was acutely aware of Ethan's presence beside her, the warmth radiating from his body, the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with something that was purely him. When they reached the top of the stairs, she could hear the girls' voices coming from Lily's bedroom. "And this is my bookshelf," Lily was saying proudly. "I organized all my books by color because I thought it looked prettier than organizing them by alphabet." "That's so cool," Sophie replied. "I organize mine by how much I like them. My favorites are on the top shelf so I can reach them easier." Clara and Ethan appeared in the doorway to find the girls sitting cross-legged on Lily's bed, surrounded by books and stuffed animals. Sophie was holding the gift. She'd brought a beautiful snow globe with a tiny carousel inside. "Look what Sophie gave me," Lily announced carefully, shaking the globe and watching the artificial snow swirl around the miniature horses. "It plays music too." She wound the small key on the bottom, and the delicate melody of Für Elise began to fill the room. Both girls watched in fascination as the carousel turned slowly inside the globe. "It's beautiful," Clara said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Sophie, that was so sweet of you. I saw it at the store and thought Lily would like it because she said she wanted to learn to ride horses," Sophie explained. "Dad said it was okay to use my allowance money." Clara caught Ethan's eye over the girls' heads, mouthing thank you to him. The fact that he'd taken Sophie shopping specifically to find something Lily would enjoy, that he'd listened carefully enough to remember her daughter's casual mention of wanting to ride horses, spoke volumes about the kind of man he was. "Can we go outside and play?" Lily asked. "I want to show Sophie the tire swing Dad made before he moved away." Clara felt the familiar pang of sadness that always accompanied mentions of David, but she pushed it aside. "Of course. Let me get your jackets." The backyard was Clara's pride and joy, a carefully maintained space with flower beds, a small vegetable garden, and a large oak tree that provided perfect shade in the summer. The tire swing hung from one of the lower branches, and Clara remembered the weekend David had installed it, back when their family had felt solid and permanent. "This is awesome," Sophie exclaimed immediately, claiming the swing. "Push me, Lily." As the girls took turns on the swing, Clara and Ethan settled on the back porch steps, watching their daughters play. The autumn air was crisp but not cold, and the late afternoon sun filtered through the changing leaves in a way that made everything look golden and magical. "You have a beautiful yard," Ethan observed. "Do you do all the gardening yourself?" "I've been learning," Clara said. "David used to handle all the outdoor stuff, so I've had to figure it out on my own. Trial and error, mostly. I killed 3 rose bushes before I figured out I was overwatering them." "Gardening's harder than people think," Ethan said. "My mom always made it look easy, but when I tried to grow tomatoes last summer, they all came out looking like something from a horror movie." "Maybe we could learn together," Clara said, then immediately felt her cheeks flush. "I mean, if you're interested in gardening. Not that you have to be. I just thought, since we're both figuring things out." "I'd like that," Ethan said softly, and something in his tone made Clara look at him more closely. "Learning together, I mean. About gardening. And other things." There was a weight to his words that made Clara's pulse quicken. They were venturing into territory that felt both exciting and terrifying, acknowledging that whatever was developing between them was more than just 2 single parents being friendly for their children's sake. "Dad," Sophie called from across the yard. "Come push us both. We want to see if the swing can hold 2 people." "I don't think that's such a good idea," Ethan called back, standing up quickly, and Clara wondered if he was as grateful for the interruption as she was. They spent the next hour in the backyard, taking turns pushing the girls on the swing, playing an impromptu game of tag, and helping them collect interesting leaves for a nature craft project Lily had learned about at school. Clara found herself marveling at how easily Ethan interacted with Lily, never talking down to her, but treating her with the same respect and attention he showed his own daughter. When Lily scraped her knee during their game of tag, it was Ethan who scooped her up without hesitation, carrying her to the porch while Clara ran inside for bandages. As he gently cleaned the minor scrape and applied the bandage, talking softly to distract Lily from any discomfort, Clara felt something shift inside her chest, a door opening that she'd thought was permanently sealed. "There you go, brave girl," Ethan said, smoothing the bandage over Lily's knee. "Good as new." "Thank you, Mr. Ethan," Lily said solemnly. "You're really good at taking care of people." "Well, I've had lots of practice with Sophie," Ethan replied, but Clara could see the emotion in his eyes at Lily's simple compliment. As the afternoon wore on, Clara found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months. There was something about Ethan's presence that made everything feel easier, more manageable. He helped serve the cookies they'd baked, praised Lily's artwork that covered the refrigerator, and engaged both girls in a lengthy discussion about their favorite movies, without ever seeming bored or impatient. When it came time for dinner, Clara impulsively invited them to stay. "I was just going to make spaghetti and meatballs," she said, suddenly nervous about extending the invitation. "Nothing fancy, but there's plenty." Ethan glanced at Sophie, who was nodding enthusiastically. "If you're sure we won't be imposing—" "Not at all," Clara said quickly. "The girls are having such a good time, and honestly, cooking for 4 is easier than cooking for 2. As they prepared dinner together, Clara was struck by how naturally they worked as a team. Ethan took charge of the garlic bread while she focused on the sauce, and they moved around her kitchen with an ease that suggested they'd been doing this for years rather than hours. The girls set the table with great ceremony, folding napkins and arranging flowers from the backyard as a centerpiece. "This is fancy," Sophie announced approvingly. "Like a restaurant." "It's perfect," Lily agreed. "Mommy, can we eat in the dining room instead of the kitchen?" Clara rarely used the formal dining room. It seemed too big and empty for just the two of them. But tonight, it felt exactly right. They lit candles and used the good china, turning a simple spaghetti dinner into something that felt special and significant. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily between adult topics and the girls' chatter about school and friends. Clara found herself studying the scene, Ethan helping Sophie twirl her spaghetti Lily, telling an animated story about her art teacher, the warm glow of candlelight making everything feel intimate and cozy, and realized that this felt more like family than anything she'd experienced in years. "Mommy?" Lily said suddenly, her voice cutting through Clara's reverie. "This feels like Thanksgiving." "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "You know, like when families get together and everyone's happy and there's lots of food and everyone's talking and laughing." Lily paused, seeming to consider her words carefully. "It feels like we're all supposed to be here together." Clara felt her breath catch at her daughter's innocent observation. Across the table, she could see Ethan looking equally moved by Lily's words. "That's a lovely way to put it," Clara managed to say, her voice slightly rough with emotion. "I think so too," Sophie added quietly. "It's nice having dinner with other people. Usually it's just me and Dad, and sometimes we forget to talk because we're tired." Ethan cleared his throat, clearly affected by his daughter's honesty. "Well, we're talking now," he said gently. "And this is definitely the best spaghetti dinner I've had in a long time." After dinner, they all worked together to clean up, turning what could have been a chore into another opportunity for connection. The girls dried dishes while the adults washed and put away, and Clara found herself fighting the urge to memorize every detail of the evening. The sound of their combined laughter, the way Ethan's sleeve was rolled up to reveal strong forearms, the sight of both girls working together with such natural cooperation. When it came time for Ethan and Sophie to leave, both girls protested loudly, Can't Sophie sleep over? Lily pleaded. We were going to build a fort in my room. Maybe another time, Clara said gently, though the idea held definite appeal. Sophie needs to go home and get ready for school tomorrow. Can we do this again soon? Sophie asked, looking between the adults hopefully. Like really soon? I'd like that, Clara said, meeting Ethan's eyes. Very much. As they gathered Sophie's things and prepared to leave, Clara felt a familiar anxiety creeping in. The evening had been so perfect, so natural, that she was almost afraid to let it end. What if this was just an anomaly? What if the magic couldn't be recreated? Thank you, Ethan said quietly as they stood in the entryway. For today, for dinner, for everything. Sophie hasn't been this happy in a long time. Neither has Lily, Clara replied honestly. Or me, for that matter. They stood there for a moment, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Clara was acutely aware of how close they were standing, how easy it would be to reach out and touch his hand, how much she wanted to find an excuse to keep him there just a little longer. Clara, Ethan began, his voice uncertain. I was wondering if maybe, Dad, I forgot my book. Sophie's voice interrupted from the living room, where she'd gone back to retrieve something. The moment was broken, but as Ethan went to help Sophie find her book, Clara found herself smiling. Maybe interruptions were exactly what they needed right now. Maybe slow was better, safer for everyone involved. When they finally made it to the front door, both girls exchanged elaborate hugs and promises to see each other at school on Monday. Can we call each other tonight? Lily asked Sophie. To plan what we're going to do at recess. Dad, can we? Sophie looked at Ethan pleadingly. If it's okay with Mrs. Clara, Ethan said, and Clara noticed that he'd dropped the formality of using her last name. Of course, Clara agreed. But not too late? School night and all? As Ethan and Sophie walked to their car, Clara and Lily stood in the doorway waving goodbye. Clara watched until the taillights disappeared around the corner, then closed the door and leaned against it with a sigh. That was the best day ever, Lily announced, throwing her arms around Clara's waist. Can we be friends with them forever and ever? I hope so, baby, Clara said, hugging her daughter close. I really hope so. Later that evening, after Lily had called Sophie, and they'd chatted for 20 minutes about everything and nothing, Clara tucked her daughter into bed with a heart that felt fuller than it had in months. Mommy, Lily said sleepily, do you think Mr. Ethan likes you? Clara felt her cheeks warm. What makes you ask that? The way he looks at you, Lily said matter-of-factly. Like how princes look at princesses in movies, like you're the most beautiful person he's ever seen. Lily. And you look at him the same way, her daughter continued, undeterred. Like he makes you happy just by being there. Clara was quiet for a moment, struck by her 7-year-old's perceptiveness. Would that be okay with you if Mr. Ethan and I were friends? More than friends, Lily asked hopefully. Maybe, Clara said carefully. Someday, if that's what happened. Lily was quiet for so long that Clara thought she'd fallen asleep. Then just as Clara was getting up to leave, her daughter's voice stopped her. I think Daddy moving away was sad, Lily said quietly. But maybe it wasn't all bad, because if he hadn't moved away, we wouldn't have met Sophie and Mr. Ethan. Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. That's very wise, sweetheart. Sometimes sad things lead to happy things, Lily continued. That's what Mrs. Johnson says at school. She says that's how life works sometimes. Mrs. Johnson sounds very smart. She is. And Mommy. Yes, baby. I think you deserve happy things. You've been sad for a long time, but today, you weren't sad at all. I liked seeing you not sad." Clara leaned down and kissed her daughter's forehead, overwhelmed by the wisdom and compassion of this little person she'd had the privilege of raising. "I love you, Lily, more than all the stars in the sky." "I love you too, Mommy, all the way to infinity and back." As Clara made her way downstairs to clean up the last remnants of their dinner party, she found herself thinking about Lily's words. Maybe her daughter was right. Maybe sometimes the worst things that happened to you cleared the path for the best things to find you. Her phone buzzed with a text message, and Clara's heart jumped when she saw Ethan's name on the screen. "Thank you again for today. Sophie is still talking about how much fun she had. She wants to know if you and Lily would like to come to dinner at our house next Saturday. Nothing fancy, probably just pizza, but she's already planning the menu." Clara smiled as she typed her response. "We'd love to. Lily will be thrilled. Fair warning, though, she's already planning what games to teach Sophie. Looking forward to it. Sleep well." "You too." Clara stared at the phone for a moment after sending the message, then set it aside and continued cleaning. But she couldn't stop smiling, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, the future felt bright with possibility. Across town, Ethan was having his own bedtime conversation with Sophie, who was equally full of enthusiasm about their new friends. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Sophie said, as he tucked her into bed. "Always." "Do you think Clara is pretty?" Ethan paused in the middle of adjusting her blankets. "Why do you ask?" "Because I think she is, and I think she's nice too, and she makes really good cookies." "All very important qualities," Ethan agreed solemnly. "Do you think you could like her like the way you liked Mommy?" Ethan sat down on the edge of Sophie's bed, choosing his words carefully. This was territory they'd never navigated before, and he wanted to be honest, without raising expectations that might not be met. "I think Clara is a very special person," he said finally. "And I can see why you and Lily are such good friends. She raised an amazing daughter." "But do you like her, Sophie pressed. "Because I think she likes you." "What makes you think that? The way she smiled when you helped Lily with her knee, and the way she kept looking at you during dinner when she thought no one was watching. Girls notice these things, Dad." Ethan couldn't help but chuckle at his daughter's matter-of-fact tone. "Do they now?" And Dad, "Yes, sweetheart. I think it would be okay. If you liked someone again. I know you loved Mommy and I loved her too, but she's not coming back. And maybe it's okay to have love for new people too." Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Sophie, I just want you to be happy," she said simply. "You take care of me all the time, but who takes care of you?" The question hit Ethan like a physical blow. In the 3 years since Maria's death, he'd been so focused on making sure Sophie felt loved and secure that he'd never considered his own needs, his own loneliness. "I'm happy when you're happy," he said truthfully. "I know, but maybe you could be even happier, and maybe Lily could have a dad who doesn't live far away, and I could have a mom who's here all the time instead of just in pictures." "Sophie, that's a lot of maybes." "I know," she interrupted. "But maybe isn't the same as never. And I think Clara and Lily make us both happier. Don't they?" Ethan considered his daughter's question seriously. Today had been the first time in years that he'd felt truly relaxed, truly himself. Clara had a way of making him feel seen and understood without judgment. And watching Sophie interact with both Clara and Lily had shown him glimpses of the confident, joyful child she'd been but before the grief had dimmed her light. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "They do make us happier." Then maybe we should spend more time with them, Sophie suggested practically, and see what happens. Maybe we should, Ethan agreed, leaning down to kiss her goodnight. Sweet dreams, wise girl. Sweet dreams, Dad. And Dad, next Saturday when they come for dinner, maybe you could make something better than hot dogs. Ethan laughed, the sound echoing through the quiet house. I'll see what I can do. As he turned off Sophie's light and made his way to his own room, Ethan found himself thinking about the evening, replaying moments and conversations, analyzing the way Clara had looked at him across the dinner table, the comfortable silence they'd shared while watching their daughters play. For the first time since Maria's death, he allowed himself to consider the possibility that his story wasn't over. That maybe, just maybe, there was room in his life for something new, something beautiful, something that honored the love he'd lost, while embracing the love he might yet find. The foundation had been laid carefully and naturally built on genuine friendship and mutual respect. Their daughters had unknowingly become the architects of something larger than themselves, bringing together two wounded hearts and showing them that healing was possible, that love could grow in the spaces left by loss. Neither Clara nor Ethan fully understood yet how profoundly their lives were about to change. They only knew that something good was beginning, something worth nurturing and protecting. And as they each fell asleep that night, both were filled with a quiet anticipation for what the next Saturday might bring. The week between their dinner at Clara's house and the planned visit to Ethan's home seemed to stretch endlessly for both families. At school, Sophie and Lily had become inseparable, sitting together at lunch, partnering for every project, and creating an elaborate secret language that consisted mostly of giggles and knowing looks. Their teacher, Mrs. Patterson, commented to Clara during pickup on Wednesday that she'd never seen two children bond so quickly or so completely. It's like they were meant to find each other, Mrs. Patterson said with a warm smile. Sophie's come out of her shell so much since Lily arrived. And Lily seems more confident too. They're good for each other. Clara nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude for this unexpected gift of friendship her daughter had found. But as the days passed, she found herself growing increasingly nervous about Saturday's dinner. The evening at her house had felt natural, unplanned, but this felt different somehow, more intentional. More like a real date, even though the girls would be there as built-in chaperones. She caught herself changing clothes 3 times on Friday evening, even though she was just staying home to grade papers and help Lily with a school project. When Lily noticed her mother's unusual attention to her appearance, she raised an eyebrow with the kind of knowing look that only children could master. "Mommy, are you practicing for tomorrow?" Lily asked innocently. "Practicing what?" "Looking pretty for Mr. Ethan." Clara felt her cheeks flame. "I'm not. I always try to look nice, Lily." "Uh-huh," Lily said with the tone of someone who wasn't buying it for a second. "That's why you've changed your shirt 4 times. 3 times, Clara corrected automatically, then immediately regretted confirming her daughter's observation. Lily grinned triumphantly. "I knew it. You like him. Lily Grace Reynolds." "It's okay, Mommy," Lily interrupted, suddenly serious. "I want you to like him. He makes you smile with your whole face, not just your mouth like you do when you're being polite to people you don't really like." Clara paused in her paper grading, struck by her daughter's perceptiveness. "What do you mean? Like when Mrs. Henderson from next door comes over and talks for a really long time about her cats. You smile, but your eyes don't get crinkly like they do when you're really happy. But when Mr. Ethan is here, your eyes get crinkly, and you laugh more, and you stand up straighter, like you feel better about everything." The accuracy of Lily's observation was both touching and slightly unsettling. Clara hadn't realized she'd been so transparent in her feelings, or that her 7-year-old had been conducting such detailed surveillance of her emotional state. "You're very observant," Clara said finally. "Sophie says the same thing about her dad." Lily continued, settling beside Clara on the couch with her art supplies. "She says he's been humming in the mornings, and he hasn't done that since her mom died. She thinks it's because of you." Clara's heart skipped at this revelation. She said that, "We talk about it at recess, about how you and Mr. Ethan like each other, but you're both too scared to say so because you're grown-ups, and grown-ups make everything more complicated than it needs to be." "Lily, Sophie has a plan," Lily announced as if Clara hadn't spoken. "What kind of plan?" Clara asked, though she wasn't entirely sure she wanted to know. "A secret plan. She says her dad needs someone to take care of him because he's always taking care of everyone else, but he forgets to take care of himself. And I told her that you need someone to take care of you too, because you work really hard, and you're always making sure I have everything I need, but you never do anything just for you." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. When had her daughter become so wise, so attuned to the emotional undercurrents of adult life? "Sweetheart, you don't need to worry about taking care of me. That's not your job." "I know," Lily said matter-of-factly, "but that doesn't mean I don't want you to be happy. And Mr. Ethan makes you happy, so Sophie and I think you should be together." "It's not that simple, baby." "Why not?" Lily asked with the devastating directness of childhood. "You like him, he likes you, Sophie and I are best friends, and we all have fun together. What's complicated about that?" Clara struggled to find an age-appropriate way to explain the complexities of adult relationships. The fear of being hurt again. The challenges of blending families. The weight of responsibility that came with making decisions that affected not just yourself, but your child. "Sometimes adults have to think about a lot of things before they make big decisions," she said finally. "Things like making sure everyone involved is ready for changes and that no one gets hurt." "But people get hurt anyway," Lily said with startling wisdom. "Like when Daddy left. That hurt even though no one wanted it to. Maybe sometimes you have to risk getting hurt to have a chance at being really happy." Clara stared at her daughter, amazed by the depth of understanding in those young eyes. "Where did you learn to be so wise?" "I pay attention," Lily said simply, "and I listen when you and Grandma talk on the phone. And I know that you've been sad for a long time, longer than just since Daddy left. But when Mr. Ethan is here, you're not sad. You're like yourself, but better. Like the mom you used to be before everything got hard." The conversation haunted Clara for the rest of the evening and well into Saturday morning. As she and Lily prepared for their dinner at Ethan's house, she found herself thinking about her daughter's words, about the possibility that maybe she had been letting fear make her decisions for too long. Ethan, meanwhile, was experiencing his own pre-dinner anxiety. He'd spent Friday evening cleaning his house with an intensity that would have impressed a military inspector, and Saturday morning had been devoted to grocery shopping for ingredients he wasn't entirely sure he knew how to prepare. "Dad, you're being weird too," Sophie observed, watching him rearrange the living room furniture for the third time. "I'm not being weird," Ethan protested, though he knew it wasn't true. "I just want everything to be nice." "Clara and Lily won't care if the couch is facing this way or that way," Sophie said practically. "They're coming to see us, not to judge our decorating." Ethan paused in his furniture, rearranging, recognizing the echo of his own words to Sophie from the previous week. "You're right. I'm being ridiculous." "A little bit," Sophie agreed cheerfully. "But it's okay. I think it's good that you care so much about impressing them." "I'm not trying to impress anyone." "Dad." Sophie gave him a look that was far too knowing for a 9-year-old. We already talked about this. It's okay to like Clara. I want you to like her. Ethan sat down heavily on the couch he'd just repositioned, running his hands through his hair. Sophie, what if I mess this up? What if I'm not ready for whatever this is? Sophie climbed onto the couch beside him, her small face serious. Dad, do you remember what you told me when I was scared to start at my new school? I told you that being scared was normal, but that you couldn't let fear stop you from trying new things. And you said that the best things in life usually require some courage. Ethan smiled at having his own wisdom quoted back to him. I did say that, didn't I? So maybe you need to be brave too, Sophie said simply. Maybe we both do. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart, Sophie said with a grin. You just haven't been paying attention because you've been too busy worrying about everything. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock, and Ethan felt his heart rate spike as he opened the door to find Clara and Lily standing on his porch. Clara was wearing a soft blue sweater that brought out her eyes and dark jeans that made her look approachably elegant. Lily was practically vibrating with excitement, clutching a small bouquet of flowers. We brought you flowers, Lily announced, thrusting the bouquet toward Ethan. Mommy said it was polite to bring something, and I picked them from our garden. They're beautiful, Ethan said, accepting the slightly wilted but clearly heartfelt offering. Thank you both. Hi, Clara said softly, and Ethan was relieved to see that she looked as nervous as he felt. Hi, he replied, stepping aside to let them in. Come on in. Sophie's been pacing by the window for the last hour. Sophie, Lily called, and within seconds the girls had found each other and were deep in animated conversation about their week at school. Ethan's house was different from Clara's, more rustic with exposed wooden beams and furniture that looked handmade and sturdy. There were photographs everywhere, and Clara found herself drawn to them as Ethan gave her a tour. Pictures of a younger Ethan with a beautiful woman who could only be Sophie's mother. Photos of Sophie as a baby, as a toddler growing up before Clara's eyes in a series of captured moments. She was beautiful, Clara said quietly, pausing before a wedding photo of Ethan and Maria. She was, Ethan agreed, his voice thick with emotion. She would have liked you, I think. She always said I needed someone who could make me laugh. Do I make you laugh? Clara asked, surprised by her own boldness. More than I have in 3 years, Ethan said honestly, and the rawness in his voice made Clara's chest tighten with emotion. They were interrupted by the girls racing into the living room, both talking at once about a game they wanted to play before dinner. Can we show Clara and Lily the workshop, Dad? Sophie asked. I told Lily about the rocking horse you're making. The rocking horse isn't finished yet, Ethan protested. That's okay, Lily said eagerly. I want to see how you make things. Mommy said you build furniture and stuff. Ethan glanced at Clara, who nodded encouragingly. I'd love to see your workshop. Lily's been fascinated by the idea of making things ever since I mentioned you were a woodworker. The workshop was attached to the house, a spacious, well-organized space that smelled of sawdust and wood stain. Tools hung neatly on pegboards, and several projects in various stages of completion occupied workbenches around the room. But it was the rocking horse in the center that captured everyone's attention. Oh my goodness, Clara breathed, moving closer to examine the intricate carving. Ethan, this is incredible. The horse was clearly a labor of love, carved from what looked like cherry wood, and detailed with an artistry that spoke of countless hours of careful work. The mane flowed in carved waves, and the expression on the horse's face was both spirited and gentle. It's for Sophie's birthday next month, Ethan explained, looking pleased by Clara's obvious admiration. I've been working on it for almost a year. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," Lily whispered, reaching out to touch the smooth wood with reverent fingers. "It looks like it could come alive and gallop away." "That's exactly what I was hoping for," Ethan said, and Clara could hear the pride in his voice. "You made this with your hands," Clara said wonderingly. "From just a piece of wood." "Well, several pieces of wood," Ethan corrected with a smile. "And a lot of patience. And maybe a few choice words when things didn't go according to plan." "Can you teach me," Lily asked suddenly, "how to make things I want to learn?" Ethan looked to Clara questioningly. "If your mom says it's okay, I'd be happy to teach you some basics. We could start with something simple, like a birdhouse." "Can I, Mommy, please?" Clara found herself nodding before she'd fully considered the implications. "If Mr. Ethan doesn't mind, and if you promise to be very careful and follow all the safety rules." "I promise," Lily exclaimed, already moving to examine the various tools with Sophie as her guide. As the girls explored the workshop under Ethan's watchful eye, Clara found herself studying him in this environment, where he clearly felt most at home. There was something almost meditative about the way he moved among his tools and projects, touching them with the familiarity of long friendship. This was a man who created things, who took raw materials and transformed them into objects of beauty and function. "What made you become a woodworker?" Clara asked, as they watched the girls examine a half-finished jewelry box. "My grandfather," Ethan replied, his voice warm with memory. "He had a workshop in his basement, and when I was little, I'd spend hours down there with him while he worked. He taught me that working with your hands was a way of connecting with something larger than yourself, that every piece of wood had a story, and our job was to help it tell that story." "That's beautiful," Clara said softly. "He used to say that patience and attention were the most important tools in the workshop," Ethan continued. "That rushing would only lead to mistakes, and that the best work came from taking the time to understand what you were working with." Clara found herself thinking that the same philosophy could apply to relationships. Maybe that's what they needed: patience and attention, the willingness to take time to understand each other before rushing into anything. "Dad," Sophie called from across the workshop, "can we show them the music box you made for Mom?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, and Clara saw something flicker across his face, not pain exactly, but a deep, settled sadness. "If you want to," he said finally. Sophie carefully retrieved a small wooden box from a shelf, handling it with the reverence reserved for precious things. When she opened it, a delicate melody began to play, the same tune as the snow globe Sophie had given Lily. Clara realized. It was their song, Sophie explained to Lily and Clara. Dad made it for Mom for their anniversary before she got sick. It plays Für Elise because that was the first song Dad ever heard Mom play on the piano. Clara felt tears sting her eyes at the obvious love that had gone into the creation of this simple but perfect object. The box itself was a work of art, inlaid with different woods to create a pattern of intertwining hearts, but it was the story behind it that made it truly beautiful. "Your mom was very lucky," Clara said quietly to Sophie. "Dad says we're all lucky when we find people who love us enough to make beautiful things for us." Sophie replied carefully, closing the music box and returning it to its place of honor. The words hung in the air as they made their way back to the house for dinner, and Clara found herself wondering what it would feel like to be loved like that, thoroughly, creatively, permanently. Dinner was a revelation in more ways than one. Ethan had clearly taken Sophie's advice about making something better than hot dogs, preparing a meal of herb-crusted chicken, roasted vegetables, and homemade dinner rolls that would have impressed any restaurant. "You cooked all this?" Clara asked, taking her first bite of what was easily the best chicken she'd ever tasted. I may have consulted a few cookbooks, Ethan admitted, looking pleased by her obvious enjoyment, and called my mother for advice on the rolls. It's incredible, Clara said honestly. I feel like I should be embarrassed about serving you spaghetti from a jar last week. That spaghetti was perfect, Ethan said firmly. It's not about the food, it's about the company. As they ate, Clara found herself marveling at how easily conversation flowed between them. They talked about everything and nothing. Books they'd enjoyed, places they'd traveled, embarrassing childhood stories that had the girls giggling. There was none of the awkward small talk that usually characterized new relationships. No sense of people trying too hard to impress each other. When Lily accidentally knocked over her water glass, sending liquid cascading across the table, Clara braced herself for the familiar spike of anxiety that usually accompanied such moments. But instead of stress and apologies, there was only laughter as everyone pitched in to clean up the mess. I'm so sorry, Clara began, but Ethan waved away her apology. Are you kidding? Sophie spilled an entire bowl of spaghetti sauce on this table last month. A little water is nothing. The sauce went everywhere, Sophie confirmed cheerfully. Dad said it looked like a crime scene. But we cleaned it up together and then ordered pizza, Ethan added. Sometimes accidents lead to better solutions. Clara felt something loosen in her chest at his easy acceptance of childhood mishaps. David had always made such a big deal about messes and accidents, treating them as personal failures rather than normal parts of life with children. After dinner, they settled in the living room for what was supposed to be a quiet evening of board games and conversation. But as the evening wore on, Clara found herself increasingly aware of Ethan's presence beside her on the couch, the way his laugh rumbled in his chest, the gentle way he corrected the girls' game strategy without making them feel foolish. Mommy, Lily said during a break in their game of Monopoly. I have to go to the bathroom. Down the hall, second door on the right, Sophie directed, jumping up. I'll show you. As the girls disappeared down the hallway, Clara and Ethan found themselves alone together for the first time all evening. The sudden quiet felt charged with possibility and awkwardness in equal measure. Thank you for dinner, Clara said, turning to face him more fully. Everything was absolutely delicious. Thank you for coming, Ethan replied. I was nervous about tonight. You were nervous? Clara asked, surprised. You seemed so relaxed and confident. I'm good at hiding it, Ethan said with a self-deprecating smile. Years of practice. I was nervous too, Clara admitted. I kept changing clothes and Lily called me out on it. Sophie did the same thing to me about rearranging the furniture. Ethan laughed. Our daughters are apparently very observant. Terrifyingly so, Clara agreed. Sometimes I think Lily sees more than I give her credit for. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the sound of the girls' voices and laughter echoing from down the hall. Clara found herself studying Ethan's profile in the soft lamplight, noting the way his hair curled slightly at his temples, the laugh lines around his eyes, the strength in his hands as they rested on his knees. Clara, Ethan said suddenly, his voice lower than usual. Yes. I want you to know that this tonight, last week, all of it, it means something to me. More than I expected it to. Clara felt her heart begin to race. It means something to me too. I haven't felt this way in a long time. Ethan continued, his eyes searching her face. I wasn't sure I ever would again. After Maria died, I thought that part of my life was over. I understand, Clara said softly. After my divorce, I convinced myself that I was better off alone, that it was safer, simpler. But now I'm not so sure, Clara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Being with you watching our girls together, it makes me think that maybe I was wrong. Maybe there's room for something new, something good. Ethan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. When she didn't, he covered her hand with his thumb tracing gentle circles across her knuckles. I'd like to find out, he said quietly, if you're willing. I'm willing, Clara said, surprised by the certainty in her own voice. Scared but willing. Scared is okay, Ethan said, bringing her hand to his lips and pressing a soft kiss to her palm. We can be scared together. The gentle kiss sent shivers up Clara's arm and straight to her heart. She felt like a teenager again, overwhelmed by the simple romance of the gesture. Dad. Clara. Sophie's voice echoed from down the hall, followed by the sound of running feet. Come see what we found. They sprang apart just as the girls rounded the corner, both looking excited about some discovery. What did you find? Ethan asked, his voice slightly rough. Photo albums, Lily announced, clutching a thick book to her chest. Sophie was showing me where the bathroom was, and we saw all these albums on the bookshelf in the hallway. Can we look at them? Sophie asked. I want to show Lily pictures of when I was little and when Mom was here. Clara glanced at Ethan, uncertain. Looking through family photos felt intimate, personal, like crossing a threshold they might not be ready for. If your dad says it's okay, Clara said carefully. Ethan was quiet for a moment, and Clara could see him weighing the decision. Finally, he nodded. Okay, he said. But just one album tonight. It's getting late and you both have school tomorrow. The girls cheered and settled on the floor in front of the coffee table, opening the album with reverent care. Clara and Ethan rejoined them on the couch, and Clara found herself drawn into the visual story of Ethan's life with Maria and Sophie. There were wedding photos that showed a younger, more carefree Ethan, with a radiant bride who was even more beautiful than Clara had imagined. Pictures of Maria pregnant, glowing with happiness and anticipation. Sophie as a newborn, tiny and wrinkled and perfect in her parents' arms. This is when I was born, Sophie narrated for Lily's benefit. Dad says I was the most beautiful baby in the whole hospital. Because you were, Ethan said softly, reaching out to smooth his daughter's hair. As they turned the pages, Clara watched Ethan's face, carefully looking for signs of pain or discomfort. But instead of sadness, she saw something else, a gentle melancholy, yes, but also gratitude, love, peace. This is my favorite picture, Sophie said, pointing to a photo of Maria sitting at a piano with baby Sophie on her lap, both of them looking at Ethan behind the camera with expressions of pure joy. Mom was teaching me to play, Sophie explained to Lily. I don't really remember it because I was too little, but Dad says she used to sing to me while she played. She had a beautiful voice. Ethan added his own voice, thick with memory. She could make even the saddest songs sound hopeful. Clara felt tears threaten as she watched this small family sharing their memories. There was something sacred about being invited into this intimate space, being trusted with these precious moments. Do you still play piano? Lily asked Sophie. A little bit, Sophie said. Dad got me lessons, but I'm not very good yet. I bet your mom would be proud of you for trying, Lily said with the simple wisdom of childhood. My grandma says that when people we love go to heaven, they can still see us and they're proud of us when we do good things. Sophie looked at her new friend with something approaching awe. Really? Really? And I think your mom would be happy that your dad has friends now, because that means you're both not sad all the time. Clara's breath caught at her daughter's words, and she saw Ethan wipe quickly at his eyes. I think you're right, Sophie said softly. I think Mom would like Clara and Lily. I think she would too. Ethan agreed, his voice husky with emotion. As they closed the photo album and prepared for Clara and Lily to head home, the evening took on a different quality. The sharing of such intimate family history had deepened something between them all, creating bonds that went beyond simple friendship. "Thank you for sharing your pictures with us," Clara said, as they gathered their things. "It means a lot that you trust us with those memories." "Thank you for caring about them," Ethan replied, "for making them feel precious instead of painful." As they said their goodbyes at the front door, both girls were reluctant to part ways. "Can we do this again next week?" Lily asked hopefully. "And can we start working on my birdhouse?" Sophie added, looking at her father pleadingly. "We'll see," Clara and Ethan said in unison, then laughed at their synchronized response. "Maybe we could meet at the park sometime this week," Clara suggested. "After school one day. The girls could play while we talk." "I'd like that," Ethan said, and the look he gave her made Clara's heart flutter. As they walked to the car, Lily slipped her hand into Clara's and looked up at her with serious eyes. "Mommy tonight felt like family again." "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Like when Daddy lived with us, except different, better, like we all belonged together." Clara felt her eyes fill with tears at her daughter's innocent honesty. "Did you like that feeling?" "I loved it," Lily said simply. "And I think Sophie's mom would have liked it too. I think she would be happy that Sophie and Mr. Ethan aren't sad anymore." As they drove home through the quiet suburban streets, Clara found herself thinking about Lily's words, about the way the evening had unfolded, about the gentle kiss Ethan had pressed to her palm and the promise it had carried. Maybe her daughter was right. Maybe some endings were really beginnings in disguise. Maybe the family she'd thought was broken forever was simply making room for something new, something different, something beautiful. For the first time in longer than she could remember, the future felt full of possibility rather than uncertainty. And as she tucked Lily into bed that night, listening to her daughter's excited recap of the evening, Clara allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they were all exactly where they were supposed to be. The weeks that followed their dinner at Ethan's house seemed to blur together in a kaleidoscope of shared moments and growing connections. What had started as playdates for the girls had evolved into something deeper, more intentional. Clara and Ethan found themselves texting throughout the day, sharing photos of their daughter's artwork, asking for advice about everything from homework struggles to dinner ideas, simply checking in because they'd grown to care about each other's daily experiences. On a crisp November afternoon, exactly 1 month after their first meeting, Clara was grading papers at her kitchen table when her phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. Instead of his usual cheerful text, this one made her heart skip with concern. "Sophie's running a fever and had to leave school early. I'm at the urgent care clinic. Everything's probably fine, but could you pick up Lily today? I don't want to leave Sophie waiting." Clara's response was immediate. "Of course. On my way to get Lily now. Is there anything else I can do?" "Groceries, dinner, anything." The reply came quickly. "You're already doing everything. Thank you." As Clara drove to the elementary school, she realized that somewhere along the way, caring for Ethan and Sophie had stopped feeling like a favor and started feeling like family responsibility. The thought should have scared her, but instead, it filled her with a warm sense of rightness. Lily was waiting in the school office when Clara arrived, her face immediately creasing with worry when she learned about Sophie's illness. "Is she really sick?" Lily asked as they walked to the car. "Like hospital sick?" "I don't think so, sweetheart," Clara reassured her. "Mr. Ethan just wants to make sure she's okay. Sometimes when people are worried about someone they love, they want doctors to check everything out. Can we make her soup? Lily asked immediately. Grandma always makes me soup when I'm sick, and it makes me feel better. Clara felt her heart swell with pride at her daughter's immediate impulse toward kindness. I think that's a wonderful idea. What kind should we make? Chicken noodle, Lily said decisively. With the little star noodles because they're Sophie's favorite. They spent the afternoon in the kitchen with Lily carefully measuring ingredients while Clara chopped vegetables and simmered chicken. As they worked, Clara found herself thinking about how natural this felt, caring for people beyond their immediate family, extending their circle of love to include Ethan and Sophie. Mommy, Lily said, as she stirred the pot under Clara's watchful supervision. When people love each other, they take care of each other when they're sick, right? That's right, baby. So this means we love Sophie and Mr. Ethan. Clara paused in her vegetable chopping, struck by the simple truth in her daughter's question. Yes, she said quietly. I think it does. Good, Lily said with satisfaction. I was hoping we did. When Ethan's truck pulled into their driveway at nearly 7 o'clock, Clara and Lily were waiting with a thermos of soup, homemade crackers, and a get well card that Lily had decorated with glittery flowers and rainbow hearts. Ethan looked exhausted as he climbed out of the truck, his hair disheveled and worry lines etched around his eyes. But when he saw them standing there with their care package, his expression softened into something that made Clara's chest tight with emotion. How is she? Clara asked immediately. Strep throat, Ethan said, running a hand through his hair. She'll be fine, but she feels pretty miserable right now. The doctor gave her antibiotics and said she should start feeling better by tomorrow. We made soup, Lily announced, holding up the thermos proudly. With star noodles because they're Sophie's favorite. Ethan looked down at Lily's earnest face and Clara saw his composure crack slightly. You made soup for Sophie. Mommy helped, but I did the stirring and measuring, Lily said importantly. And I made her a card. Can I give it to her? She's sleeping right now, Ethan said gently. But I know she'll love it when she wakes up. Why don't you both come in for a minute? Clara suggested. You look like you could use some coffee and a few minutes to decompress. Ethan shook his head. I should get Sophie home and settled. She's been asking for her own bed all afternoon. Ethan, Clara said softly, stepping closer to him. When was the last time you took care of yourself? You've been at the clinic for hours. You probably haven't eaten anything, and you look ready to collapse. I'm fine. You're not fine, Clara interrupted gently. And that's okay. Let me help. Something in her tone seemed to reach him, because his shoulders sagged slightly in defeat. I don't know how to let people help, he admitted quietly. I'm learning too, Clara said, her heart aching for this man who gave so much to everyone else but seemed unable to accept care in return. But maybe we can figure it out together. 20 minutes later, Sophie was tucked into Clara's guest room with a bowl of soup and Lily reading to her from her favorite picture book. The antibiotics were already working their magic, and while Sophie was still pale and tired, she was alert enough to be touched by the care her new friends had shown. This is the best soup ever, Sophie declared between careful spoonfuls. It tastes like hugs. That's because it's made with love, Lily said seriously. Mommy says that's the most important ingredient. Downstairs, Clara had practically forced Ethan to sit at her kitchen table while she heated up leftover soup for him and made him a sandwich. He ate mechanically at first, clearly running on empty, but gradually began to relax as the food and Clara's quiet presence worked their magic. I keep thinking I should have this figured out by now, Ethan said, suddenly staring into his coffee mug. It's been 3 years. I should be better at handling crises on my own. Says who? Clara asked, settling across from him with her own cup of tea. I don't know. Society. My own expectations. The part of my brain that thinks accepting help makes me weak. The same part of my brain that made me think I had to prove I could handle everything perfectly after David left, Clara said with understanding. The part that whispers that needing people means you're failing somehow. Ethan looked up at her with something like relief in his eyes. Exactly. But you know what I've learned these past few weeks, Clara continued. Watching you with Lily, seeing how easily you stepped in to help when our car broke down, how naturally you included us in your life. I've learned that letting people care about you isn't weakness. It's trust. And trust is one of the bravest things we can offer. When did you become so wise? Ethan asked, his voice soft with something that might have been wonder. When I met someone who made me want to be braver, Clara replied honestly. They looked at each other across the small table, and Clara felt the weight of all the unspoken feelings hanging between them. In the weeks since their first dinner together, they'd grown closer in ways that went beyond simple friendship, but neither had been willing to name what was happening between them. Clara, Ethan began, his voice uncertain. Mommy. Lily's voice echoed down the stairs. Sophie wants to know if she can sleep over since she's already in the guest room. The moment was broken, but as they looked at each other, Clara saw something shift in Ethan's expression, a decision being made. What do you think? He asked quietly. I could stay on the couch, make sure she doesn't need anything during the night. You could stay in my room, Clara said, then immediately flushed at how that sounded. I mean, I could take the couch. You shouldn't sleep on the couch when you're this tired. Clara, or there's the other guest room, she added quickly, flustered by her own boldness. The one I use as an office. It has a daybed. Ethan smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him all day. The office sounds perfect. As they settled the girls for the night, Sophie in the guest room, with Lily curled up on a sleeping bag beside the bed, insisting that sick friends shouldn't sleep alone. Clara marveled at how domestic and right it all felt. This was what she'd thought she'd lost forever, when David left, the sense of being part of a team, of having someone to share both the joys and burdens of daily life. Later that evening, after both girls had finally drifted off to sleep, Clara and Ethan found themselves sitting on her back porch, sharing a bottle of wine, and listening to the quiet sounds of the neighborhood settling in for the night. Thank you, Ethan said suddenly. For today, for the soup, for taking care of Sophie like she was your own daughter. She feels like my own daughter, Clara admitted, surprised by her own honesty. Both of them do when they're together, like they were always meant to be sisters. I've been thinking the same thing, Ethan said quietly. About the girls, about other things. What other things? Clara asked, though her heart was already racing because she thought she knew. About us. About what this is becoming. Ethan turned to face her more fully. Clara, I need you to know that I never expected this. After Maria died, I thought that part of my life was over. I thought I'd used up my quota of love, that what we had was once in a lifetime. And now I'm realizing that maybe I was wrong. Maybe love isn't finite. Maybe it's renewable if you're brave enough to let it grow again. Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. I thought the same thing. After David, after the divorce, I convinced myself that I was better off alone, that relationships were too risky, too complicated. But then you fixed our car, Clara said with a watery laugh. And you were kind without expecting anything in return. And you let Lily help you in your workshop, like her questions mattered. And you looked at me like I was worth seeing, really seeing. You are worth seeing, Ethan said fiercely. You're worth everything, Clara. You're smart and kind and beautiful, and you've raised an incredible daughter who has more wisdom and compassion than most adults I know. Ethan, I love you, he said suddenly, the words tumbling out like he couldn't hold them back any longer. I love your laugh and your stubbornness and the way you make everything feel possible. I love how you take care of everyone around you and how you're teaching me that it's okay to let someone take care of me too. Clara felt the world shift around her, like everything had suddenly clicked into perfect focus. I love you too, she whispered. I love your gentleness and your strength and the way you see the best in everyone. I love how you've taught Lily that she's worth protecting and cherishing. I love how you make me feel like I'm enough just as I am. They moved toward each other as if pulled by gravity, and when Ethan's lips met hers, Clara felt like she was coming home after a long, difficult journey. The kiss was gentle but sure, full of promise and possibility, and the kind of love that heals old wounds while creating new dreams. When they finally broke apart, they remained close, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. What happens now? Clara asked softly. Now we take it one day at a time, Ethan said. We keep learning how to be brave together. We figure out how to blend our families and our lives in a way that honors what we've both lost while celebrating what we've found. The girls are going to be over the moon, Clara said with a laugh. They've been plotting this for weeks, Ethan agreed. Sophie told me yesterday that she thinks we're both too slow at figuring out obvious things. Lily said the same thing. She's been giving me advice about my hair and clothes because she wants me to look extra pretty for Mr. Ethan. They laughed together, the sound carrying across the quiet yard like music. Over the following months, their relationship deepened with the changing seasons. They moved slowly, carefully, always mindful of their daughter's feelings and needs. There were challenges, awkward moments when old habits clashed with new realities. Difficult conversations about expectations and boundaries, the inevitable adjustments that came with blending two families who had each learned to function independently. But there were far more moments of joy. Family movie nights, where they all piled onto Clara's sectional sofa sharing popcorn and debating the merits of animated versus live-action films. Saturday mornings in Ethan's workshop, where both girls were learning to sand and measure and create their projects ranging from simple birdhouses to increasingly elaborate dollhouse furniture. Quiet evenings after the girls were in bed, when Clara and Ethan would sit on the porch or by the fireplace talking about everything and nothing, sharing dreams and fears and the 1,000 small details that make up a life. Spring arrived with a burst of warmth and possibility, and with it came Sophie's 10th birthday. Clara and Lily had spent weeks planning their contribution to the celebration, determined to make it special for the girl who had become such an important part of their lives. The morning of Sophie's birthday, the four of them gathered in Ethan's workshop for the unveiling of the rocking horse he'd been working on for over a year. Sophie gasped when she saw it completed, her eyes wide with wonder as she took in every perfectly carved detail. "Dad, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," she breathed, running her hands over the smooth wood. "Try it out," Ethan encouraged, and Sophie carefully climbed onto the horse's back. As she began to rock gently back and forth, her face lit up with pure joy. But then she stopped, suddenly looking around at the three people watching her with such love and pride. "This is perfect," she said softly. "But you know what would make it even more perfect?" "What, sweetheart?" Ethan asked. Sophie looked directly at Clara, her expression serious but hopeful. "If Clara could be my new mom, like officially." The workshop fell silent except for the sound of birds singing outside. Clara felt her heart stop, then start again at double speed. "Sophie," Ethan began, but his daughter continued undeterred. "I know Mom is always going to be my first mom, and I'll always love her and miss her," Sophie said, with the clarity that sometimes came from children who had faced loss too early. "But people can have more than one mom, right? Like how some kids have stepmoms who love them just as much as their real moms." Clara felt tears streaming down her face as she looked at this brave, wise little girl who had somehow found the courage to voice what they'd all been feeling but hadn't known how to say. "And if Clara becomes my mom," Sophie continued, warming to her theme, "then Lily becomes my sister for real, not just my best friend who feels like my sister." "Sophie," Clara managed to say through her tears, "I would be honored to be your mom, if that's what everyone wants." "It's what I want," Sophie said firmly, "more than anything." "Me too," Lily chimed in, bouncing on her toes with excitement. "I've always wanted a sister, and Sophie's the best sister anyone could ask for." All eyes turned to Ethan, who was looking at Clara with an expression of such love and gratitude that it took her breath away. "Clara Reynolds," he said, dropping to one knee, right there in the sawdust-covered workshop. "Will you marry me? Will you let me love you and Lily for the rest of our lives? Will you help me raise Sophie and let us help you create the family we've all been searching for?" Clara looked around at these three people who had somehow become her whole world. Sophie still sitting on her beautiful rocking horse, grinning through happy tears. Lily clasping her hands together like she was making a wish. Ethan on his knee in his work clothes, offering her everything she'd ever wanted, but had been afraid to dream of. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes to all of it. To forever and family and love that grows bigger instead of smaller." Ethan stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around, while both girls cheered and applauded. When he set her down, he kissed her deeply, and Clara tasted salt from both their tears and the sweetness of promises being made. "This is the best birthday ever," Sophie declared from her perch on the rocking horse. "Even better than I imagined." The wedding took place 6 months later on a perfect autumn day, exactly 1 year after their first meeting. They chose to have the ceremony at the spot where it all began, the street corner, where Clara's car had broken down and Ethan had stopped to help. The city had given them permission to close the small residential street for an hour, and they'd set up chairs and an arch of flowers right in the middle of the road. Clara wore a simple but elegant dress in soft ivory, while Lily and Sophie served as flower girls in matching lavender dresses they'd chosen together. Both girls carried small bouquets and wore crowns of flowers looking like fairy princesses as they scattered rose petals down the makeshift aisle. Ethan wore a navy suit that brought out his eyes, and when Clara appeared at the end of the street, walking slowly toward him, past the very spot where they'd first met, she saw those eyes fill with tears of joy. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt, officiated by Clara's childhood pastor, who had known her family for decades. But the most moving moment came when, after exchanging traditional vows, Clara and Ethan turned to include Sophie and Lily in their promises. "Sophie," Clara said, taking the girl's hands in hers, "I promise to love you as fiercely as any mother has ever loved a daughter. I promise to support your dreams, celebrate your victories, and comfort you through challenges. I promise to honor the memory of your first mom, while creating new traditions and memories together." "Lily," Ethan said, kneeling to meet her eyes, "I promise to protect and cherish you as my own daughter. I promise to encourage your curiosity, nurture your talents, and always make you feel valued and heard. I promise to be the kind of father who shows you how good men should treat the women they love." There wasn't a dry eye among the small gathering of family and friends, but the tears were all of joy and gratitude for the love they were witnessing. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, both girls cheered and threw the rest of their flower petals into the air, creating a shower of pink and white that caught the afternoon sunlight like confetti. The reception was held in Clara and Ethan's backyard. They'd bought a larger house together, one with enough space for their blended family, and a workshop where Ethan could continue his woodworking while being close to home. The celebration was casual and joyful, filled with laughter and dancing, and the kind of happiness that comes from people who have found exactly where they belong. As the evening wound down and the last guests said their goodbyes, the new family of 4 found themselves alone in their backyard, surrounded by the remnants of their celebration. "Mrs. Cole," Ethan said, pulling Clara close for a dance to music only they could hear. "I like the sound of that," Clara murmured against his chest. "Me too," Sophie called from where she and Lily were chasing fireflies at the edge of the yard. "Clara Cole sounds perfect." "Sophie Cole and Lily Cole," Lily added, testing out how her own new name sounded. "We're really sisters now." "You were always sisters," Clara said, looking at her daughters, both of them now and forever. "Love made you sisters long before any paperwork made it official." As they stood there in their backyard watching their daughters play in the gathering dusk, Clara marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. A broken-down car, a stranger's kindness, 2 lonely children who had recognized in each other what their parents had been afraid to see in themselves. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked softly. "Fairy tales," Clara said with a smile, "and how they never tell you that sometimes the magic isn't in finding your prince or princess. Sometimes the magic is in finding your family. And sometimes," Ethan added, watching Sophie and Lily collapse in giggles as they tried to catch the elusive fireflies, "the magic is in realizing that love doesn't replace what you've lost. It just grows bigger to make room for what you've found." That night, as they tucked both girls into their beds in their new shared home, Clara felt a completeness she hadn't known was possible. Sophie's room was decorated with a mix of her old treasures and new additions, including the snow globe that had started her friendship with Lily displayed proudly on her nightstand, beside a photo of her birth mother and a new family picture from their wedding day. Lily's room reflected her artistic nature, with walls covered in her drawings and crafts from Ethan's workshop, including a beautiful wooden jewelry box he'd made especially for hers, inlaid with her initials in mother of pearl. "Good night, Mom," Sophie said sleepily, as Clara kissed her forehead. "Good night, my darling girl." Clara replied, her heart full to overflowing with the privilege of being called by that precious name. "Good night, Dad," Lily said when Ethan appeared in her doorway. "Good night, Princess," he replied, smoothing her hair back from her face with the gentle touch of a man who understood what a gift he'd been given. Later, as Clara and Ethan sat on their back porch sharing a quiet moment before bed, they reflected on the unlikely series of events that had brought them together. "Do you think we would have found each other anyway?" Clara asked, curled against Ethan's side. "If my car hadn't broken down that day?" "I like to think so," Ethan said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "But I'm grateful we didn't have to find out. I'm grateful for broken cars and brave little girls and second chances. And third chances and fourth chances," Clara added with a laugh. "However many chances it takes to get love right." "Speaking of getting things right," Ethan said, shifting so he could look at her properly, "there's something I've been wanting to tell you." "What?" "I went to visit Maria's grave last week. To tell her about you, about us, about how happy Sophie is." Clara felt her throat tighten with emotion. "How did that feel?" "Right," Ethan said simply. like I was introducing her to the woman who was going to love our daughter and take care of our family, like I was passing on something precious and trusting you to protect it. I will, Clara whispered. I promise I will. I know you will. And Clara, yes, I think she would have loved you. I think she would have been grateful that Sophie found someone who understands that loving her doesn't mean forgetting where she came from. They sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by the sounds of their neighborhood settling into sleep. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle blew, carrying its lonesome song across the night. But Clara felt anything but lonely. She felt complete, surrounded by love and possibility, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Years would pass, bringing new challenges and joys in equal measure. There would be school plays and soccer games, teenage drama, and college applications, graduations, and first jobs, and eventually weddings of their own for Sophie and Lily. Through it all, the family that had been forged by chance and choice would remain strong, bound together by love that had grown from the simplest act of kindness. But on this night, their first night as the official family, Clara and Ethan simply held each other close and marveled at the beautiful complexity of a love story that had begun with a broken-down car and a stranger's willingness to help. Sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with the most ordinary moments, and sometimes the greatest love affairs start not with passion, but with kindness. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, a 7-year-old girl will whisper the words that change everything. She's my mom. Please marry her. Because children in their infinite wisdom often see the happy endings that adults are too afraid to imagine. In the Cole household, that happy ending was really just the beginning.